This is our next speaker, Congressman J. Randy Forbes, who has served on the House Armed Services Committee for the past 13 years and currently is the chairman of the Seapower and Power Projection Forces Subcommittee. As chairman, he's responsible for research, development, acquisition, and sustainment of Navy and Marine Corps programs. Congressman Forbes' position is central in developing the nation's long-term strategies to meet our future security needs. Hailing from Chesapeake, Virginia, he is one of our nation's most vocal advocates for strong national defense. And I also would like to say that he's one of the best and most effective advocates for advocating strategy ahead of budget. I'm also proud to say that Congressman Forbes shared his thoughts on naval issues by writing in the U.S. Naval Institute's Proceedings magazine, and we're honored to have Congressman J. Randy Forbes with us here today. Let's give him a big welcome.
Thank you, Pete. Pete, thank you so much, and I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for letting me be here, but in addition to that, I just want to thank the Naval Institute for the great work it's done for some 140 years. You know, I was thinking today, I'm blessed to have with me, as so many of you are too, incredibly gifted staff people, Eric Sayers and Alex Gray. And I was thinking, though, that how great it's been for the Naval Institute throughout all of these years to give those kind of brains, that kind of thought process, a home to be able to talk and think. And for that, Pete, we just appreciate that so much. Also, when I was thinking about coming here today, you can't talk about everything, and a lot of times we get in these events and we kind of run down the line items and where we think we're going to go. And the topic I was given and asked to talk about is, what does the nation need from Seapower? And in all due respect, I think it's probably the wrong question. I think the real question is, what does Seapower need from the nation? And as we look at that, I want to begin today by telling you a couple of assumptions. And the first assumption is this, and I told this to a number of our chairmen the other day, to the Speaker, the Majority Leader. I believe that we are either in or dangerously close to a crisis regarding the national defense in this country. And part of the reason is exactly what Pete just mentioned. For way too long, we have been allowing the budget to drive the strategy instead of the strategy driving the budget. And there's no way we can navigate our way out of this crisis if we continue to do that. For the last 5 or so years, I think what you will find in this entire town is the question everyone has been asking is, how much do we want to spend for national defense? The problem is they try to get that answer and then develop a strategy and implement the strategy. But I challenge any of you today, go knock on the Speaker's door or the Majority Leader in the Senate's door. Go take any one of the budget chairmen out of the House or the Senate, bring him in a room and say, okay, if this is not the right figure, what's the right figure to spend on national defense? And they cannot tell you. But what's even worse, they have nobody they can pick up the phone and call and say, what is the right figure? And I want to just suggest to you this. If we don't change that debate, then it doesn't matter what we talk about with Seapower or anything else. We're not going to navigate our way through the national defense challenges that we have today. And let me just also tell you this, because I believe this very firmly as well. If that debate is about whether we want to buy a Tomahawk missile or we want a new highway or a new playground at a school or a new park, we will lose and the country will lose. If that debate is about whether or not we should have a $600 toilet seat at the Pentagon, we will lose. But if that debate switches on its head and it's about whether or not we want to control access to the 9 choke points around the globe, we will win. If it's about which shipping lane do we want to give up, we will win. If it's about whether or not we want to protect our satellites and our cyber security, we will win. And more importantly, it's about this. If it's about whether or not we want our men and women in uniform fighting for this country to ever be fighting on a platform or with a weapon system that is equal to or inferior to our adversaries, we will win. And last but not least, if it's about whether or not we want our men and women in uniform having to deal with the fact that we don't have air dominance in a fight somewhere around the globe, we will win. But the problem is we have not shifted that debate, but I think that debate is starting to shift. And if I could today, what I'd like to do, I don't have any fancy PowerPoint presentations for you. I don't have any charts or graphs. So the only thing I can bring with me is this imaginary clicker here, and I'm going to put this book down. It's sliding on me. But if you'll let me just take this little imaginary clicker, and I want to click you back in time to March of 1968. And in March of 1968, I was doing something incredibly important. I was a sophomore at Great Bridge High School, getting ready, literally, to give a speech to run for junior class president. My big two issues were whether or not the boys had to wear socks in their penny loafer shoes and how long their hair should be. Across the United States, you had the Rolling Stones that people were listening to, not me, didn't have any musical talent, and you also had the Beatles. James Crew had just finished celebrating with his new wife the fact that he had graduated as an honor student from the United States Air Force Academy, and William Cordero had just found out he was going to be the father of a new little baby boy. Now, I went on to win and become junior class president at Great Bridge High School. Rolling Stones made a boatload of money. Beatles broke up. James Crew never celebrated again with his wife or his family. William Cordero never held his son a single time because they were both killed in Vietnam. In fact, in that month alone, we lost 156 planes, 250 airmen. We lost 1,300 American lives in 1 month. And if I could take a snapshot of that whole war, we lost 58,000 Americans, over 3,000 planes, almost the equivalent of the entire United States Air Force today. Now, there are a lot of reasons why. But if I could flash up one of the major reasons, we could never establish air dominance. Now, let me flip a couple decades ahead, and I was being sworn in as a freshman delegate to the Virginia House of Delegates. Just a few weeks later, the fourth largest army in the world with some very sophisticated air defenses would invade Kuwait, and the United States would be asked to come help repel that invasion. And we would, as we've done many times in the past and will do many times in the future, we would answer that call. The best predictions that we had is that we would need 35,000 body bags for that fight. When all the smoke had cleared, everything had stopped, we used 147 of those bags. We returned 34,853 of them back to the United States empty, and we only lost 23 airplanes. Why? Because we had air dominance. Now, what had happened in that 2 decades of time? Well, a lot of different things. But 3 major things happened, all 3 of which were kind of pushed back on by the Pentagon. The first one was we developed a stealth airplane, which you guys remember Air Force didn't particularly want. They were afraid it was going to go into their budgets, and they didn't really want to operate at night and, you know, all those kind of things. But Congress came in and worked very, very hard and said, nope, we need a stealth airplane. The other thing that we developed was a guided munitions that would ultimately be called the Tomahawk missile. Again, had a lot of pushback on getting that in the Pentagon. And the third big thing was jointness through Goldwater-Nichols, where for the first time in history, we could bring all the services together in one attack at one time with one force that made an enormous difference. Now, let me flip you with this imaginary clicker to where we're sitting today, you and I sitting in here in this room, and what I'd love to do is be able to give you a snapshot, just one photo of what national defense looks like today, but you know I can't do it. I have to bring in an album, and so for that album, let me bring in pictures that would have been sent in by some of our military leaders around the world. The first picture I would bring in would be General Breedlove, and this is what he told us in testimony before our hearing. He said, we may no longer be able to guarantee air dominance, or at least we're getting close to the point where we can't guarantee it. In other words, could look a whole lot closer to Vietnam than to Kuwait. But let me put that picture on the table a minute and bring you another picture from General Welch, who would tell you that we now have the oldest and the smallest Air Force combat force in the history of the Air Force. When he said that, as much as I respect him, I thought he was wrong. I made my staff 3 times go through the inventory, check it, and send it back to me. And you know what? He was right. In addition to that, in 5 years, he'll have 50% of the inventory that he has today. So I add another picture to our album when we see General Odierno for the first time testifying to us that he's not sure he could win one conflict, where it used to be that we could guarantee that we could win 2 conflicts. And then I remember hearing from Admiral Locklear the phraseology that if we get down to 260 ships, we cease to be a superpower, we become a regional power. Now, I don't know exactly how many ships we need, but we need more than we have today. And if you look at the National Defense Panel, an independent bipartisan panel, they think we need somewhere between 326 and 346, but even the Navy would say we need 306 ships. But if we take their plan that we have today, next year we go down to 274 ships. 11 of those, if we hadn't stopped it, would have been cruisers that would have been essentially beached, and we'd have taken the electronics and the radar and the manning off of it. It would have taken us 15 months to 2 years to get them back in the water. So we were about 3 ships away, or would be about 3 ships away, from where Admiral Locklear would say, we cease to be a superpower and become a regional power. Now, if that doesn't worry you, just remember 2007, of all the validated requests that we have from our COCOMs around the globe, the Navy could beat 90% of them. This year, we'll meet 42% of them. And in addition to that, I look around the globe and I see the Russians building up more capacity, more capability than at any time since the Cold War. And they're flying bomber missions off the Gulf of Mexico, off Texas, Louisiana, Florida, and the States. And we're just saying, it's okay. And then in addition to that, we all know what we see with the buildup that the Chinese are doing and the money they're spending, but it's not just the money. It's that we're looking at today, they got about 60 subs in the Asia-Pacific area. We have 32. But take it out 5 years. Look at the curve lines. They'll be at 82. We'll still be around 32, maybe 34. And then when you look at, everybody knows pretty much the vulnerability we have in our cyber capability. But what I'm scared to death about, too, is what could happen to our satellites and whether or not we're protecting those. And, of course, then you go to North Korea. You know, North Korea got 28,500 soldiers in North Korea. North Koreans, 9.3 million people, personnel in their military, largest in the world. And what were we just getting ready to do? We had to put an amendment to stop it on the floor, getting ready to pull up the landmines along the DMZ, which is the greatest stop that we have to them. And we're sitting there saying, what are we thinking about? But I could go on. I could talk about Iran or Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, but you guys get the picture, and some of you are better experts at painting that picture than I am. And I know I've painted a dire picture to you, but it gets even more dire. When you think about the fact that in the next 10 years, 2/3 of all the trade in the world is going to go through the Asia-Pacific area. When you think about today in New York City, 95% of all the international financial transactions that are taking place are going by underwater cable, not by satellite. And if we could talk about it a little bit more, we'd find out some people are trying to get into those cables. Then in addition to that, next few weeks as we are going into the holiday season, about 85% of all the goods that we sell in our stores coming on the surface of the waters. Got 9 choke points in the world. I asked some of our chairmen, I asked some of our leadership the other day, which one you want to give up? Strait of Hormuz, 35% of the oil in the world. CIA says if we lose it 2 weeks, price of gas goes up to $7.50 a gallon. You're willing to give that one up. And maybe if you don't want to give that one up, you give up the Asia Pacific. 2/3 of all the trade in the world for the next 10 years, you're willing to lose it. And of course, all of them say they don't want to lose it. Well, if I've painted a dire picture to you, it's not a new picture. And so let me take my magical clicker now and click you back, if I could, a couple of decades before where I started, back as that sophomore in high school. And now I'm celebrating my first birthday, and President Eisenhower is coming into office, and you guys remember what he was facing. Recession, not a good economic situation. We saw the buildup conventionally of the Russians and how much more they had conventionally than we do. Wasn't even a close comparison. They had 4 nuclear tests that they had been running. Truman administration was saying we needed more money to be spent on national defense. And President Eisenhower did an interesting thing, and forgive me, those of you guys who are in uniform who I have so much respect for, but as one of the greatest generals probably of all time, he didn't go to the Pentagon. He set up 3 different groups and had them really compete against each other for a new strategy that they would come up. Project Solarium, many of you know about it. Some of you have written about it. And just so we don't buy into the myth that John Kennedy was so much smarter than Dwight Eisenhower, he sat there and didn't take a single note the entire time, but at the end stood up and repeated almost verbatim the 3 presentations that have been made, dissecting it and cutting it for what would work and what wouldn't. And then they created the new look, which held the Russians off for a decade and actually cut $7 billion out of national defense. Now, I tell you that because I believe today that we have an obligation to navigate our way out of the crisis we have for national defense. But I don't think we can keep looking to the Pentagon only and saying you've got to fix it, because they've got a lot of limitations on what they can do and what they can say. I'm not comfortable, I'll be honest with you, the administration's going to do it, because that would kind of defy current events and what I say. But I'm excited because I really do believe we have an opportunity that Congress can take on that challenge and help navigate us out at this particular point in time. And I'm more encouraged today than I've been in a long time that we're seeing a turn on getting rid of sequestration, which is the beginning, but just the beginning. But the second thing is that we need to come up with new innovative strategies, new ideas. I love the concept of new offsets. Remember, on all the offsets that we had in the 70s and the 80s, it took 2 decades to bring them about. We've got to do the research, we've got to do the development, we've got to do the thought before we can actually do the expenditure to get the money, but we need to be ready for that. One of the members of Congress asked me the other day, he said, you want to create a new Department of Defense on Capitol Hill? I said, no, I want a Department of Ideas. I want us to be able to put ideas on the table that help us, again, to navigate and to go where we need to go. And I'm optimistic, too. Last thing is this. We need to embrace this, not be afraid of it as we carry this debate across the country. And we need to ask the American people and policymakers, what kind of national defense do you want for this country? And begin to ask that question so we can develop the strategies we need to do that. And the final thing I just want to leave you with is this. I believe that the most important question we will ask is not whether we'll succeed. I know there's a lot of naysayers. I know people that have been in this business for a long time and they say, we've tried this before, we've done this before, it's too difficult, hill's too hard to climb. And they're all probably right. It's a very, very difficult lift. But the most important question we have to ask is not whether we'll succeed. It's whether we'll try. And I am optimistic that we're going to see a Congress coming up, hopefully joining with you, to make sure that we can combine the private sector with the public sector, with our allies, and create the kind of strategies, the kind of implementation of those strategies that we need to navigate our way out of the national defense crisis that I think we're either in or headed towards. And I believe this, if we'll lead the way, the American people will follow. So thank you very much for letting me be here with you today. And Pete, thanks so much for having me.
We have time for a couple of questions if people want to go to the mic and offer one.
Hi, Congressman Forbes, Kevin Wensing. The Panama Canal is going to be expanded here in 2016. How is that going to affect national security? And also, if you're from Hampton Roads area, what's the effect of that?
Well, for national security, obviously, I think my biggest concern is as we look not one spot around the world, but so many spots around the world developing, all of a sudden it becomes a math problem, and just how we're going to have the ships that we need to be in all the areas that we need to have them in. It's a great thing to say we've got a wonderful, capable ship, but we can't still beam it there, And so the concept of presence is important. That's why what I've been trying to do to our leadership is to say, okay, let's look at the threats. Let's look at the areas in the globe that you want to be. Tell me which ones you're willing to walk away from. If they then say, no, we've got to cover all these areas, then it's a math question. How many ships does it take to actually do that coverage? And then it's a math question on the budget to get there. We win that debate. So it is a concern. In Hampton Roads alone, I think we have a lot of opportunities, but we have a lot of challenges too. As you know, there are other ports that are competing for that cargo. And the big thing for Hampton Roads is not going to be so much their ports, but how they get stuff out of there. So I think it's going to be very important what they do for their rail and for their road systems to make sure they can get the goods out of there. If they can do that, I think it's going to be a wonderful, great opportunity for them, and I'm excited that they've got that opportunity.
Congressman Tim Oliver, you brought very much the big D defense issue up. My question is, do you think the country is ready to address the big T, which is the taxes it'll take to pay for the kind of country that we've come to accept and the kind of defense that we need?
Yeah, Tim, I guess I don't buy into your premise that one has to follow the other one. And so I think the first question we have to ask the American people is what defense you need, what defense you want. And then the second one is how do we come up with the money to pay for it. Now, there are those who believe the only way we can get it is by raising taxes. There's another, I think, very viable argument that as you raise those taxes, you may destroy some of the economic engine that could be creating those dollars that we need for national defense. Let me just tell you this. I think as I go across the country today, I see an incredible ability to light up this economy. I see businesses that are sitting on the sidelines, that are ready to get in the sidelines. None of them tell me, oh, what we need to get back into this economy and create more jobs, get the economy going, is we need you to raise our taxes. What all of them tell us is this: what's killing us is the unnecessary regulations you're putting on us. They're actually saying the taxes kill us sometimes from getting in the game. But the big thing is the unpredictability. You're changing the game on them from Monday to Friday. I think more important than any taxes we would raise to pay the economy, I think we could light up this economy if we let the business community know around the globe, we're not going to change the rules on you from Monday to Friday. We're going to give you some predictability to operate in. One of the big things I worry about, not just with the economy, but with national defense, we need the private sector back in. I'm really worried now, not just about the industrial base we have, but so much of the private sector that's walking away and saying, we're not even interested in trying to compete anymore with DOD because you're putting too many regulations on us. You're more concerned about how much profit we're going to make than whether you're getting a good deal there. So, Tim, I would say to this, I think everything should be on the table for discussions. I think I feel very committed that the American people are ready to have a strong defense. I think if you look at sequestration, when sequestration was put out, 7% of the American people were concerned about sequestration. By the next year, when people found out what it was, 68% of the American people were saying they don't want any more cuts to national defense. Now, you can put taxes on the table, but I don't buy the argument that the only way we get to where we need to go with the economy is by increasing taxes.
I think we have time for one more.
Okay.
Congressman?
Sorry.
If I may, Lauren Hershey, I'm an attorney, I'm a civilian. I follow foreign policy fairly closely for the last 40, 50 years. You mentioned allies towards the end of your remarks. Who do you see as really vital and important and rising allies? I'm thinking of Vietnam, Burma, India, a different littoral, if you will. And what are you doing as a parliamentarian with other parliamentarians in other countries? Could be Germany, could be UK. I just invite your comments, please. Yeah.
First of all, I think all of the above, and the reason is I don't think that we should be just looking and saying we only want the big allies, the prominent allies that are in there. You know the normal names that we could throw out. We got our UK friends, our Australian friends, the Japanese, you know, all very, very vital for what we're doing. They bring big things to the table. But I think in this situation, we shouldn't even just look at people who are going to be our allies. I think we ought to be looking at people who can be with us some of the time. You know, that could be very important for us. If you ask what we're doing with other parliamentarians, very little, because I find that most of the stuff we do with other parliamentarians doesn't go very far. What we are doing is with the ambassadors and with the leaders of those countries, and we're meeting with them on a regular basis now. In fact, we even had meetings where we bring the ambassadors all together in a room so that we can all talk and have a dialogue, which, believe it or not, they haven't done very much before, so that we can start saying this. What I'm finding from our allies is we have to look at what our needs are, but then what their needs are. So if you look at some of our allies and you say, what's the number one concern to you? Ours would be defense. Theirs would be trade. So we need to make sure that we're responding to what they may need on trade, but then we can look at what we need on defense. And here's the big thing that I see from so many of them. They're saying, we don't know what your strategy is, and that concerns us because we've got to make acquisitions and we've got to make procurement decisions down the road. I think we need to do a better job at trying to make sure that we are describing that strategic plan to them so it can integrate together. Last thing I'll tell you this. I think the world has really changed when we look at technology and what we're going to be having in years to come. I think it's going to have to be more of a joint effort on a global basis with our allies if we're going to meet the technology advantages that we want to maintain and hold.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Pete, thank you so much for letting us. Thank you guys all for being here. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.